You don't need to take notes on what I'm going to go over. You really just kind of need to, once we get started, look at this as like a Shrek production TV show and just watch
Yay!
and follow along. And then if you have any questions about like getting work in, IXLs, Lakers looks, which have been popular lately, then just send me an email. Because it's just a lot easier to answer those through email because then I can check stuff online and make sure it's all going. If you have any questions that are completely unrelated to school, you can send those through email. Or you can raise your hand when we're at the end here and ask random questions. So I'm going to share my screen here in a little bit because I don't like having my face on the screen. I feel like I've put on like 50 or 60 pounds in the last 2 weeks.
Nice.
That's just weird.
Yeah. No. There's
I like it. Grow it out until the end of quarantine.
just until the okay.
That's what my dad is gonna do. I've motivated him to grow his beard out all the way till the end of quarantine.
Dobbin, your hair still looks fantastic though, I must say.
Thank you.
Even in
Mini Shiva.
quarantine.
I've started doing it left now instead of right.
I knew something was different. Okay. Let's go ahead and we're going to get started. I'm going to mute everyone here. So if you do have a question, do the raise your hand thing. And then I'm going to share the screen. Let's see. I got everyone.
Wait, William? Is that a knife?
Okay. Then I'm going to share this screen right here. So what I was thinking, you guys have done a really, really good job with this week's work and everything. I think just having like one task a day has helped a little bit. So it's like Lakers look and a task. Next week will look very similar to this week. Just so you know, let me see. Can you guys see my agenda? Are you on that screen? Yes? Okay. So this is this week. Next week will be very similar. It'll be Lakers looks. Maybe an IXL one day. There's one day where you're going to finish your MENA notes to do the third section. If you've already done all the notes, that's good. You're just ahead. You just have a day off in geography, really, except the Lakers look. But I'll try to keep it pretty similar to this week so that it's not too much work. I don't think this week was too much work. At least no one complained out loud, so that's always good. But you guys have been doing a lot of, oh, Riley's got his hand. What's up, Riley?
So wait, the notes like the MENA things, like what was the history and religion? That's the notes?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then never mind.
So like that whole reading, it was like 3 big chunks of reading. And some people just did the whole thing all in one day, which was a lot.
Wait.
I thought. Some
The
people,
whole, like,
but I broke it up into, let's see, last Friday was like day 1, and that was the first section. And then yesterday was day 2. That was section 2. That was the biggest section, I think, yesterday. And then next week, Tuesday, will be the third section and the last section.
so if we've done both sections so far, we don't have any more work?
Not on that, not until Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Tuesday you guys will turn those in. So you, if you wanted to, you could just finish it and be done before Tuesday. But I know you guys have a lot of other stuff, so which is why I kind of did today's thing, because I've been sending you guys locations. You guys have been putting them on maps, but we haven't actually had any time to talk about them or actually know what these places are. So what I did was I created a field trip, and with this field trip, here we are. We're gonna go on a little road trip. But due to Wi-Fi issues, I'm going to just click right there and go to our field trip. It's so much easier. All right, so can everyone see where it says Mina's physical features in purple? All right. Now, I apologize for going quickly, but there is a lot of information. And as I tend to do, I started putting this together and then I got super carried away. And I was like, oh, I'll just do like 5 or 6 locations and we'll look at them. Won't that be fun? And then the next thing I knew, I had 43 locations. And I was like, holy chips and salsa. It was like too many places to go to in one sitting and all this stuff. So I'm going through this quickly right now. But I want you guys over the next week to also go through this tour. And I will put the link on the agenda and in modules and everywhere so that you can see. And I'll remind you next week to just go through it because there's a lot of 3D pictures. There's cool places to explore that we really don't have time to like explore right now because you're going to be watching me go through it. So let's begin. Here we go. Oh wait, Jagger, your hand. You got a question before I launch?
Are our notes graded?
Not really.
And
Wait, no. The notes for the Mina thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will look at
Oh.
those. Yeah.
And will we have a test on this?
Yes. But
Okay.
this stuff I'm doing right now isn't going to be a test. This is just so you understand it more. So
when are we gonna have a test?
in like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
We got a while. We're still learning the stuff right now.
Okay.
Lulu, you got a question?
The quiz is on April 22nd, right?
Yep, April 22nd. So about 2 weeks out, a little bit less. But hopefully this should just help you with the test. That's the whole reason we're doing this. This is it's hard to understand what things are when you just look at a dot on a map. So we're gonna look at, starting off, I kind of did a little west to east with this. We'll go way out, we'll go macro. There is Africa. There is the Middle East right there. And we've been looking at the Atlas Mountains. I have a very cool viewpoint. This is actually the tallest peak in the Atlas Mountains. It's a 3D picture. It's kind of crazy because all of a sudden, snow. It's like, you know the desert's there, you know the Sahara's there, but the Atlas Mountains are still, in some areas, over 12,000 feet tall. Is that right? Yeah. And, but most of them tend to be around, the highest peaks around 9,000 feet, 3,000 meters. It's still very, very tall, especially when you remember that right now in Florida, we are at like 3 feet elevation. These mountains are at 3,000 meters elevation. Let's go to our next location. The next big location we're going to go to on this field trip of sorts is the Sahara Desert. So the Sahara Desert, as you guys know, is the top section of Africa. It is the world's largest hot desert. Here's a nice little view that I found. You know, there's thousands of different places to look at in the Sahara, but I love this with the 3D. When you look over it, you look down and you think, oh my gosh, look at all of those sand dunes. And then you zoom in a little bit more and you start to realize the sand dunes aren't sand dunes, those are mountains. And those mountains of sand have sand dunes on top of them. And sand dunes have sand dunes. And it's crazy. When you look at this too, it gives you a great visual of how the desert and the winds work. The sand in the desert is like wind across water. So see how it looks like ripples? That is the desert wind slowly blowing the sand, and then that's what creates these giant sand dunes. It'd be like if water could sort of had the same texture as sand, water would look like that a lot of the time. And then after we go to the Sahara Desert, we're going to go visit the second largest river in the world. You guys may have heard of it, as long as you're not in denial. It is the Nile. We have the Nile, which starts down here in Lake Victoria, and it goes north, which right there is kind of unusual because most rivers tend to run towards the equator. This one runs away from the equator and towards the Mediterranean. Starts up in the mountains and goes all the way down. And at the top of the Nile River, we have what is known as the Nile River Delta. It is this little triangle area right here. The triangle kind of looks like, if you look over this digital drawing, right around Cairo, the main Nile kind of stops, and then it breaks off into all these small little rivers that run into the Mediterranean. What's great about that is it makes all of this land incredibly fertile. So you could just throw seeds down. Like, I want bananas, you're planting bananas. Throwing down corn, grow corn. Like, whatever you want to grow, it grows here because it's so fertile from all the rich silt and everything brought from the Nile towards the Mediterranean. And it just, the reason that, or it being so fertile, is the reason that ancient Egypt started right here in this area of the world. The Great Pyramids are right here. It's where the oldest civilizations began. From the Nile River Delta, we're going to just take a quick jump over to the right, and we've got the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal goes from the Mediterranean up here down to the Red Sea down here. It is a man-made structure. So to even show that a little bit more, it was dug out of the earth so that ships could make their way from Asia to Europe. And when you see the view from like this, you can really see it's just like desert. And then they dug a deep hole and made a canal. This is a port, a long dock for a really long ship. See how just straight it is. It's just dug out of the sand. And it is the most used canal and like area of traffic in the world because of everything going from Asia to Europe and Europe to Asia right through this area. Jagger, you got a question?
How big are the Great Pyramids?
It kind of a tough. The Great Pyramids alone, we could not fit all three on the entire campus of school. They would basically, one pyramid would take up about 3/4 of the campus. So if you picture that, like, that's about how big the Great Pyramid of Giza is.
Oh.
Pretty big. Pretty darn big. All right, from the Suez Canal, we're going to take a little look right here at the Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula is just this little peninsula. It's like, you guys remember, a peninsula is a piece of land with water on three sides. And Sinai Peninsula is just that. It's got water on the west, water on the south, even though it's got a very tiny little south, and then water on the east right here. So this is what we call the Sinai Peninsula, which moves down to the Red Sea, one of my favorite seas, because it looks like a giant squash slug. If you look at the Red Sea from above, it looks like someone stepped on a slug. It's got two little antennae that stick out there, and then this big slug body, and that is the Red Sea. It is red because you killed that poor slug. It's really rather sad. Okay, this is the major port right up through here, through the Suez Canal. And just to give you one more image, zooming out here, Europe right here, Asia down over here and around the corner. This is the quickest passageway for the two. So just imagine how much stuff is going through there. The next little stuff is going to be this big peninsula called the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula is this giant landmass right here. We know it's a peninsula because it's got water here, a water here, and a water here. It sometimes is just called Arabia, which I kind of like to call it because I think it sounds cool and like an old movie. So Arabia is this whole peninsula right here. And at the south of Arabia is the Gulf of Aden. This area right here is called the Gulf of Aden. Shout out to Aden. And then in the southern portion of the Arabian Peninsula is what's called the Empty Quarter or the Rub al Khali Desert. This is a massive desert, huge. It is really that type of desert that when you think of like movies with camel races and maybe the dune buggies, they have a lot of car races in this desert still and horse races. If you've ever seen Hidalgo, it goes like that's in this desert. One thing I was doing yesterday that was kind of fun, and I recommend doing it. Well, I mean, it was teacher fun. Let's put it that way. It's nerd fun. But I was going to like these huge deserts, hitting the street view and looking for any place to try to like find a good view of what these deserts look like. And you find the most random things clicking around these deserts. Like right there, this dot right here. Like, oh, that'll be a great view of some sand dunes, right? It looks like sand dunes. I'm curious, what could it be? Oh my gosh, it's actually an entire city in the middle of the desert that you really would almost have no idea is even there. Like when I zoom out, it's just in between these sand dunes. Then zoom out a little bit more, and now it's basically gone. So it's a fun thing to do. It's kind of like hide and seek, figuring out where stuff is. Use the street view and just poke around, see what you can find. Somewhere around here is a little challenge. I found it was a clothing store in the middle of the desert on one of the dots. Very random, very weird. Okay. Next, we're going to go to the Arabian Sea. On our way to the Arabian Sea. The Arabian Sea is this big body of water that goes all the way around this area, touching the Indian Ocean. We have India right here. We've got Arabia right here in the Arabian Sea. And then from the Arabian Sea, we're going to turn the corner and go to the Gulf of Oman, which is right here. From the Gulf of Oman, we're going to go to the Strait of Hormuz. A strait, if you guys remember, is a passageway. That's all that a strait is a way from one area to another area that it usually narrows down a little bit. And you can see that when you have the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, and then it goes through this little area, it narrows down. I was searching for cool pictures to find, and I found a picture from a ship that's actually going through the Strait of Hormuz, and I was so excited. It's like, oh my gosh, I found a pirate ship. This is amazing. There's actual cannons on this pirate ship. And I was like looking around, I'm like, what are the odds? But then I started to, think a little bit, and I'm like, why would pirates still use cannons? That doesn't really make any sense. And then I was like, and why is this pirate ship so clean? This pirate ship looks cleaner than like my classroom. And then I looked over here and I thought, why would pirates have a kiddie pool play area? That really doesn't make any sense at all. So it turns out it's a cruise ship. Or a cruise ship that was taken over by fun-loving pirates. I'm not totally sure yet. But there are a lot of ships that go through these areas, a ridiculous amount. You could hop on a cruise. This almost looks like a Disney or Carnival cruise or something. You got see the buckets that fill up and then pour over. Super fun. On to the next one, the Persian Gulf, which is what is connected by the Strait of Hormuz from the Gulf of Oman. So here we have the Persian Gulf. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see where we are again globally. Persian Gulf is right here. Arabia, Africa. After the Persian Gulf, we're going to jump up to the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is this giant body of water right here. Just to show you exactly how big it is, if I zoom out here, this is all of Europe. Like all of Europe. That's the Caspian Sea. It's enormous. It's huge. And also, for those of you that are little geography people, geographers, you'll notice it is landlocked. It doesn't have access to any sea or ocean. But it's called Caspian Sea. That is incorrect. Caspian Sea is technically a lake. It has no access to outside oceans or any seas. But here's the funny thing about the Caspian Sea. It is technically a lake. It is the world's largest lake by like a lot compared to all other lakes. You guys know about the United Nations and the UN? It's that group that countries join, and then they're part of the UN to kind of make sure the world has a little bit of a global vision. Well, the UN has laws that they are able to go to any sea in the world and make sure that things are working fairly, things are going smoothly, that the economies and trade and no one is doing illegal arms dealing like weapons or anything. The UN is kind of, the police of the world. They would not be able to go to the Caspian Lake if that was the name of the Caspian Lake, because somewhere in the bylaws for the UN, they do not have access to lakes. Those are considered private and the UN doesn't get to go to them. But they do have access to seas. So for that reason and that reason only, the Caspian Sea is called the Caspian Sea. It is technically a lake though. And then if we go right next door to the Black Sea, you might kind of go, well, it's the same exact thing, Mr. Shrake. Like, it's completely landlocked. It's a lake too. And you would be wrong, because this is technically a sea. When you zoom, wrong way, zoom on in, and we go down to where Istanbul is, you'll notice this nice little river that runs between these two, the Black Sea and then the Mediterranean Sea. So the Black Sea has access to the Mediterranean Sea, and then the Mediterranean Sea has access through the Strait of Gibraltar to the Atlantic Ocean. So by definition, the Black Sea is a sea because of that tiny little passageway right there that gives them access to the Atlantic Ocean. All right, now moving on to the River Jordan. River Jordan is a river that runs between the Sea of Galilee, which does have access to the Mediterranean Sea, so it is named correctly. And it is a river that runs down to the Dead Sea, which has access to the Sea of Galilee, which has access to the Mediterranean Sea, so it's also a sea. It's not a straight line like what I drew here. It actually zigzags. It's not man-made. It is a river, and it goes to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is a fascinating place. It is a sea that has so much salt concentration in it, that nothing can live. It has no fish, no plant life. It's just too salty for any life to live. And if you look over at the little picture here, because of the density of the salt in the water, you just float on top. Like, she is not on those people that look like they're standing, they're not even standing. They're just floating in the water. It's so dense. I went there when I was your age. Two things I remember. It really burns when it gets in your eyes, the salt water, and it tastes terrible. It's like the worst tasting water I've ever had in my life. I don't recommend it. Don't buy Dead Sea Aid or cola or anything. It'll be disgusting. All right, from the Dead Sea, we're going to look at the Syrian desert, which was one of your places to look at. It is right there. And then we're going to move over we have the Euphrates River, which I've outlined in blue, and the Tigris River, which I've done in orange because, well, tigers are orange, and that makes perfect sense. The Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, this is really where Mesopotamia started. In the reading you guys did, it talks about Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. Well, this was Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia literally means land between two lakes. These are the two lakes, the Euphrates and the Tigris. The way I remember which lake is which is the movie E.T. Phone Home. E.T. Phone Home is E and then T. So Euphrates and then Tigris is how I remember the order of the rivers. And what happens is during the flooding season, these rivers would flood a big chunks of this area that just made farming and irrigation so much easier. And that's why civilization started here. That's why Mesopotamia is one of the first civilizations to begin, along with their neighbors, ancient Egypt, who is right over here. They were fairly close to each other. All right. So that is my quick little, those are the physical features that were on the map. Those are things that you guys did on your map. Neil, do you have a question? I saw your hand up, Neil.
So if the case is that they named the Caspian Sea,
Yes.
just so they could look inside, can you just like there is like a lake outside my house, can they just name that lake a sea?
No, if the UN wanted to come in, so like the Caspian Sea, if the UN wanted to go to that lake outside your house, they would have to have permission from the US government. They couldn't just do it. However, since this is considered a sea, and seas can't be owned by countries, then it's open to anyone that would want to go there. So the UN is able to have ships there. But like that lake outside your house, or think of the Great Lakes in the United States, like how we share those with Canada. Since those are technically lakes, though, the UN couldn't just have UN boats going around those lakes. They would have to have permission from Canada and the United States government to even be there. But since they call this a sea, the UN can set up shop there, and they can do, their UN stuff that they do.
Wait, so they can't call this a sea?
They can't what?
Well, I was asking, like, can they just call this a sea, or they can't?
I mean, you could call anything whatever you want, but they wouldn't. Technically, a sea should have access to the ocean. One of the reasons I think when this was first named the Caspian Sea, I think they assumed it did have access through the Black Sea. So it was assumed that the Caspian Sea was connected to the Black Sea, which was connected to the Mediterranean Sea, which was connected to the Atlantic Ocean. So then it would technically have been a sea. So it was first named that, and they didn't think they were wrong. But then they wrote all these laws in the UN, and they wrote in those laws the thing about the seas, and they just haven't gone back to change it. Because now with satellite imagery and everything we know it's not actually a sea, but it's too late. Like it's already been named. It's kind of the way that one goes. On this slideshow, I did add, and I know I'm over my 30 minutes, guys, but I do want you guys to go back to this slideshow, because on this slide, I went through and then I started to add, I got the pyramids to look at. There's a couple religious places for you to go to. Mecca, the city of Jerusalem. There are just some beautiful places. I'm just going to kind of like click through here while I'm talking to you guys. Like Baalbek is in Lebanon, and it is actually a Roman. This is an ancient Roman ruins, but it's in Lebanon, not in Rome. Then there's the Great Ziggurat of Ur not cigarette, ziggurat. And what a ziggurat is this giant building. This is the first city-states that started in Mesopotamia. Like you just did in your reading, the ziggurats would have been in the middle of these city-states. They were food storage, and then up on the level is where the king would have lived, and then on the level on the top above that is where they would have spoken to their gods. It would have been like access to the gods. And this is one of the oldest, largest ziggurats from, it would have been in Sumer, one of the first Mesopotamian city-states. It would have had a big city wall around it. It would have battled other city-states, and it has the greatest name ever of Ur. Then there's also Petra, in Syria, which is another amazing site. All of these incredible places that are carved out of the mountains. They are made out of sandstone, and they have these incredibly detailed carvings that are the buildings right out of the sides of the cliffs. Really fascinating to look at. It's cool to do the street view on these, and you can actually walk around and walk in them. And then after Petra, we go to a modern day Khalifa, which you guys know, or I know a lot of you do. It's the world's tallest building. The world's tallest building in Dubai. It starts up here and goes all the way down to here. It is crazy, and you can do a lot of good street views with this one too. And then religious sites. We've got Mecca, which is where, if you are a follower of the faith of Islam, it's where you take your holy pilgrimage to Mecca. And this might be where you actually go. It'd be the Kaaba. And it actually means cube, because it is this giant cube where they will do large prayers and services from. A beautifully cool area. And then here's a mosque over on the other side, Sheikh Zayed Mosque, which is the other side of Arabia. And some of these places, guys, the architecture, I know 12-year-old's dream is not always to look at architecture, but some of the architecture here is incredible. It's beautiful. They have the gold inlay. I mean, and what's amazing also about this is it's just surrounded by desert. So even on how they built it is so impressive. And I recommend doing some tours of these places. We'll go to Jerusalem, which Jerusalem, as we know, is a hotspot for all three of the religions that we were looking at: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. It has the Wailing Wall, which is an old original wall from the ancient city of Jerusalem that a lot of Jews and Christians go to pray. And you can kind of look up. It's like an old city wall from thousands of years ago, a couple thousand years ago. But it's a very holy site for prayer. And then there's also the Mount Temple, which is another religious site. What's crazy about these sites, or what's, is interesting, I guess, is that all three religions kind of lay claim to them. All three religions say that they're theirs. And all three religions, because they're so closely tied in how they originated, are fighting over a lot of these sites, which is one of the things when you always hear about the problems in the Middle East. The majority of the problems with the Middle East are over religious sites and religious lands. And people saying that, no, these are my lands, and other people saying, no, these are my lands. And that really is pretty much the basic struggle. People saying dibs and no one actually listening to them and saying no. Hello. That was it. That was my quick tour. It's the only way I can get you guys stuff. I'm gonna put this link on everywhere, so you guys can go back and do it on your own. Then, if you have any questions, please email me. If you have any questions right now, any questions from anyone?
Oh, me. I have several
Okay,
things.
Savin.
We're off of you.
Okay, so when you were talking about the desert, I thought of Fast and Furious because they had a race in the desert.
Which Fast and Furious?
I think it was 7.
Okay, I'll have to watch that one.
And, okay, number 2. So
Yeah.
I've actually been to the Burj Khalifa.
Oh
and,
yeah.
yeah, it was really cool. And I'm done.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's amazing.
Yeah, the view there
Do we
is
leave?
Yeah, you guys are free to go.
Bye.
It's in the Middle East.
Was not the tallest.
Good guys. Bye, Lulu.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye, Neil. Bye, Ben. Or hello, Ben. Bye, Riley. Did you do some good sit-ups, push-ups?
Oh no, I was going like this. I was going, but I was doing sit-ups
That's
earlier.
I need to do some of those.
Wait. Okay.